Hi, everybody, and welcome to Tears Tulle Talk, a podcast that's celebrating people showing up from their perfectly imperfect lives to celebrate their magic. We are here today with Liz Corwin, who is one of my absolute favorite yogis in the entire world. And Liz was just a participant a few months back wearing the original skirt for the Tears Tulle Movement. Liz, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about you?
Oh, well, thanks for having me. It's so nice to finally meet you after all the correspondence we've had and just all the build up to this moment of finally, getting the skirt and passing it on to the next girl. So I'm my name's Liz. I am a military and yoga teacher. So I used to be a Navy F-18 pilot. And from that very stressful world, slowly discovered yoga and all of the pieces of it that I was missing of balance and calm and, that side of life. So now I am a full-time yoga teacher and I own a company called Walkabout Yoga, and I run international yoga retreats that have kind of a strangely similar background to the Tears Tulle movement of and a lot of my yoga classes and trainings do as well. But this idea of we have to go into the darkness to come back into the light, and that kind of balance of life, the military world and the yoga world, just all of it. So, so I run Walkabout Yoga. Well, obviously right now, some of them have been canceled, but we've got a few trainings this fall. I've done Machu Picchu, Italy, I'm doing Tanzania next year, like a safari yoga retreat. And so this walkabout thing is basically about how we explore the world around us. And then we always come back home, right? And we can do that through meeting people and collaborations and other cultures. So it's really like a very exploratory kind of taking the yoga off the mat as well, and just traveling and experiencing life in all of its dimension. So that is what I do full-time now. Still in the military too as well, part-time. So
that is so cool. I love watching your adventures and just seeing where you are in the world and how you're showing up, and exploring who you are from within the broken parts or the darker parts or these struggles. So that's one of the reasons I love following your Instagram page so much. And I just think you're doing some really cool things. And especially nowadays when social media is, everyone's highlight reels. And so to see somebody showing up and saying, no, it's okay to be sad, or it's okay to feel this struggle and still connect with the parts of yourself that you love and that you think are magical, I think it's super amazing. So thank you for sharing that.
Actually, just to talk about that, just a friend posted this and about toxic positivity and this side of life that we share a lot on social media that's just like the best of, right? Like you said, the highlight reels, our smiles, our families, our vacations, our this and our that. And it's like, but wait a minute, like there's this other side that we're missing, that we're not exposing and being vulnerable with each other. And that's where humanity, the grit of it lives, and that's how we truly, I believe, connect. So I definitely don't think my social media is always, sunshine and rainbows all the time, but it's got to be that balance, So I appreciate you saying that, and I totally relate. Just that idea of just toxic positivity that can really harm when people see that and they're in a dark place in their time, or not even a dark place, but just a bad day, right? Like it's a daily thing. It's not even like always just a state of mind or whatever. So.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. All right. Which leads us perfectly into, so every podcast beginning will start with a Tears Tulle moment. So I have started this even when, especially then, which is talking about something that we love or something magical in our hearts, even when something unexpected or a struggle or, a detour in life that we weren't ready for happens. And saying, especially then, no matter what's happening in the world, I still have that in my heart. even on the bad days. So kind of what you were just talking about. And I know that I'd reached out to you and asked you what your even when, especially thens were, and they were really good. So I would love for you to share those with our listeners too.
That was like, I appreciated that. Just pondering session of, all right, I wrote a few of them down, and I really actually just enjoyed the thought process and then the word choices of playing with that. So thank you for that offering. So I came up with two. And the first one was, I am carving my path even when I doubt my compass, especially then. Oh gosh, how many times do we doubt what we're doing and our dharma and our purpose and what we're trying to offer to the world, and yeah, especially then. And my second one was, I am reuniting even when I break, especially then. This idea that those moments where sometimes they're called, sorry, they've got the lawn guys outside, but it might be a little loud in the background, but when we're breaking and when we're in those moments of pure questioning, that is laying the foundation and laying the seeds of what we're supposed to be coming into, right? Like if we are supposed to empower or inspire or offer or share, then we have to go into those deep, dark places of not feeling empowered. And so that you have that place to come from and to speak from. So that was my second one. I'm reuniting even when I break, especially then.
I love that. I love it so much. Okay, so you were part of the original Tears Tulle movement. So the skirt is still moving throughout the United States and Canada. And when it visited you, your photos and your story that were posted were so interesting. You had wings and boats and yoga and all kinds of cool props. And for anyone who's just tuning in and doesn't know a whole lot about the Tears Tulle movement, it follows a rainbow tulle skirt to the homes of 52 women in 52 weeks across the United States and Canada. And it's branched out where women are now sharing skirts of their own. They're showing up as trailblazers, and they're starting Tears Tulle tribes as well, where they're sharing those skirts from within circles. And so the skirt that made its way to you was the original Tears Tulle skirt. And I would love to hear just a little bit about your experience. I love the lawn guys, Liz. They are so Tears Tulle. They're so
podcast days, right?
They're showing up at the perfect time because this is the Tears Tulle podcast. So I would love to hear a little bit more about, that experience, because we see the photos and we hear the story, but to have you in person sort of expressing how you felt during that time, I think would be really special to our listeners.
Yeah, so that skirt, when I first received it, I don't know how you got it into the box, first of all. It's exploded like a jack in a box as soon as I kind of cut the side. And it was so huge and so full and so overwhelming in such an incredible way. After years in the military, I didn't wear a lot of color, like pinks and purples and bright greens and blues. And this pop of joy was, as soon as I saw it, I was so honored to just be invited to be a part of this with you, to share, because even just receiving and opening that box with that skirt in it changed my state of mind, right? Something that small and seemingly insignificant, right? Like a multicolored crazy rainbow skirt can literally shift a state of being. So that was really exciting itself. Like I was just happy to receive the thing. It was never, opened and had to just go out of tool. And I took it out and it just kept going and it kept going. And as I was looking at this skirt and thinking about your movement and Tears Tulle, the idea of doing it taking the photos with it near a gray battleship, it was like that. This skirt has that irony, you know, just holding those two images simultaneously just seemed like what had to be done with it. So I put a message out actually to the Facebook community saying, hey, do any photographers want to play with this? And I got a message back from this incredible guy. And so again, it just sparked community because I didn't even have somebody all pre-picked out to do this with. And I met that man on the pier to take these photos. And it was like, it just was like magic. It was so much fun just standing in front of this battleship and again, like holding these two images simultaneously. This seemingly kind of aggressive and muted and forceful image with this playfulness and this ethereal nature of silliness. We have a word in the yoga in Sanskrit called lila, and it's divine play. And it's this idea of doing something from bliss, for bliss, by bliss, no other point but bliss. It's like a kid that builds a sandcastle at the beach, and then like, you know, all the parents are like, oh, it's beautiful, don't, you know, it's so nice. And then the kid just like stomps on it. And you're like, what did you do that for? And because there was no point in him building it except for, or her building it except for the moment of being in the present with it and doing it. So that skirt to me just symbolizes Leela, like in all elements of for bliss, from bliss, by bliss. And then the black on top, you know, this idea of the shadow side of life that is just as important, because that is where we remember all the pieces of who we are that maybe have gotten lost along the way. So, or forgotten, not lost, just forgotten. So that was really fun. And then, yeah, there's just I let him kind of play with the images afterwards, and we did the wings thing, and I'm like, okay, yeah, that's cool. That's just awesome. Like, yes, thank you. Like, I didn't even expect that one or know that was coming. But again, you know, a lot of, I feel like my mission and what I love showing up with in the world is holding two sides of something, the beauty of something and the truth behind it as well. And that both are important and both are part of what it means to be human and sharing this experience with others. So that was my experience with the skirt. And then again, like to come around full circle was boxing it up and shipping it to the next woman. And I remember as I closed up the box and taped it up and put a little card in there for her, just my whole heart like went into the box to like send to her, so that when she opened it, it had that same. And so I realized that it wasn't just the skirt kind of popping out of the box of the jacket. It was like all the energy that went into this, all the women that have touched this, and that it is, you know, been a part of their lives. So thank you for making me a part of that experience and getting to send it on with that intention and blessing, or whatever you want to call it, to the next woman. So
wow, thank you so much for being part of that experience. And it's so interesting that you say that you put you know, your love into the box. So many of the women who have participated have private messaged me to say, or they've actually posted it on social media or wherever, to say, I could physically, like I could feel the energy coming towards me as I opened it. I could feel this love and this support coming from other women, because it isn't always easy to show up for yourself, to connect and then teach others how to do that too. So I think it's such a cool thing for you to say that you put your love, your heart into that box, because that's part of what this is all about, that we're sharing this skirt. And when I wore it for the first time, it sat at my house for like 9 months before I realized, oh my gosh, this skirt should be shared with people all across the country and in, you know, parts of Canada. And now it's become this sort of global celebration. So yeah, I absolutely 100% believe that your heart and love went into that package.
Its own like aura afterwards. You know, like it's going to be one of those things that's just kind of like glowing, and people can kind of come near when they need a little bit of healing or something.
Right. It does have that power, a good power, you know, a good healthy power. So I've been, you know, I am, like I said, I absolutely love, especially your Instagram account. I follow it regularly, and I just enjoy the vulnerability, you know, the realness that you display on your page. And I was just on yesterday, actually, and I saw this poem. And for those that might not know, Liz is an absolute poet. You're an absolute poet. I have read some of your poems with my husband, and I've cried, and they're so beautiful. If there isn't one yet, I'm hoping there'll be a poetry book at some point so I can share that with my daughters. But I just read this poem that you wrote, and it was titled Rejection, and I'm going to read it for our listeners, and then I would love to hear your thoughts on this poem. So it's Rejection. We only feel rejected if we've rejected ourselves. Without the need for affirmation, there's no piece of us to sell. When love's a pure gift without pressure to earn, rejection ceases to exist. The other's released from return. It's just, and I hope I'm doing it justice. The way that I read it is just how I hear it. And I would just love to hear your thoughts on that poem, because it too feels so connected to this idea of tears and tulle.
Sometimes I like to hide behind my poems and I try to make them big enough that I'm like, okay, nobody can really know what's going on behind the scenes. I also like to write from a place sometimes where it can be universal from either side. And I actually, until you just read it just now, there's two sides of that, right? There's the side of being the one rejected, and then there's the side of being the one rejecting, and both hold pain, right? Both can be overwhelming to go through, to reject someone or not be able to give somebody what you think they need. And at the same time, maybe not be receiving what you expected to receive or wanted to receive. So there's two sides of that. And again, I think both can be just incredibly painful experiences to go through. But that poem was about how if we're grounded and we're centered within who we are, and if we're okay with letting somebody else down, and if we're okay and love ourselves enough to recognize that we had set maybe expectations to begin with, and expectations can be a very interesting word, right? To offer and to be who we are without always expecting anything back from it. Again, this is big in social media, right? This idea of needing validation for when we do share things or when we do offer pieces of ourselves. And it's been something that I've really been focused on the last 2 years with my social media feed, is trying to recognize that whatever it is that I'm putting out there, would I put it out there regardless if I never heard from a single person ever again? Because when we can create from that place of abundance versus lacking, when we can love from a place of abundance versus lacking, when we can know ourselves so truly that rejection isn't even possible, then all we do is create, and all we do is give out, and all we do is release that, as Sue Monk Kidd would call it, or Glennon Doyle called it, that largeness. Just release it out to the world without needing anything back all the time. It's so liberating to every side, right? Every side then. And I think the other side of that is when we know that we're living from that place and we feel that guilt of feeling like we're rejecting or letting somebody else down, then we also know that other side of that's not ours, right? There's a boundary there of that's their thing to process and go through as well. And so it's not even on us to feel the burden of rejecting them, because if they love themselves, it wouldn't be rejection, right? So I don't know, it's just hearing it spoken is so different than writing it yourself. So thank you for reading that to me, because it gave me a whole nother different aspect of even when I wrote it. So, and I suppose that's what poetry does, right? Like you never know how people are going to take it or what part's going to matter to them. Or so.
Thank you for sharing your vulnerability with me and opening and letting me know sort of a little background and then what came up for you presently with the poem. I know that sometimes I do read them out loud here and they do take on different meanings. So it's interesting to hear your thoughts and your feelings. And then, I'm sort of celebrating how that's connected with me and I'm able to show up differently because of those words, because of your vulnerability. And I think, like you were saying, I mean, I've been guilty of this myself, to taking down a post, in the past because not enough people were liking it. And then I questioned whether it was good or it was worthwhile. And I think that you talking about expressing from a place where we can just put that out into the world is so, it just, I think, motivates and helps people to understand that things can be different even when they're hard, because I think that is the scariest part, putting yourself out there. You see artists that post things and then they take them down and it's like, oh no, that was so beautiful, that touched my heart. Who knows what the algorithms were doing or what was happening in people's lives at the time that they saw it. So I feel so blessed that you shared your vulnerable heart with us today. And I think it was a very, very special description of what that poem means. All right, so I am curious as to who inspires you in the world, and maybe even, what you wanted to be as, when you were a little kid, when you were growing up. I'm curious if it is the same as where you presently are, or if it's different. I'm just curious.
It's very different, I think. As a kid, I feel like I had a lot to prove, and that drove a lot of the decisions I made early in my life. That was part of why I joined the military, was this idea of like, oh, people aren't going to expect this. I'm going to push the envelope. I'm going to do it. I'm going to prove I can. And so there's a lot of that, actually just what we're talking about now, that need for not only external validation, but internal validation of, oh, they say I can't, therefore I'm going to do it. Which I think in some ways is very ambitious and motivating, but there's other pieces of it that can be a little bit detrimental, right? Because then it becomes, well, are you doing that because you really love it, or are you doing that because you need to prove something? Like, where is the motivation coming from? So I think for me, it's really changed what I've wanted to be in that sense. I take my motivation now from people that are truly vulnerable. Like, it's just, I love being around it. I love being around people that, and I don't need it to be someone like at the top of their game, right? It doesn't have to be somebody on the news or somebody that has written a million books or anyone like that. Oftentimes I actually take a lot of, this is really personal, but I take a lot of my inspiration from people that are hard on themselves and people that are very, I don't want to say, use the word insecure, but that have been through a lot and really kind of gone through the gauntlet of life. Watching human beings feel vulnerable or feel exposed or lack confidence is probably the number one thing in my life that inspires me. Watching people have to fight for dignity and self-love is probably my personal biggest inspiration. And where they find that from, when they do along the way through life and its experiences, that I think for me is where I take most of my inspiration. There's a lot of, I love to read, so I could give you a book list of people that have inspired me, what I do now with yoga. So I could go off on an entire yoga tangent, but I think just in general, where I take inspiration from is from the pieces where you wouldn't expect people to find that kind of self-love and dignity, as I was talking about. And that is what fuels me to talk more about this idea of self-love and the darkness and the shadow energy associated that helps us rediscover who we are, right? Because until we can really love all those pieces, it's not just that we look at them and we acknowledge them in our mind, but to like embrace those pieces of ourselves again that we don't love, and to watch people that have done that. There's my inspiration, I guess.
Yeah. That is, to me, magic when, it isn't the degrees or the prettier things or the social media status or whatever. It's really, gosh, I can relate so much to what you're saying, to see somebody show up in their vulnerability when things are hard or they're going through struggles is, to me, they say, who says this? Brene Brown, maybe, the magic's in the mess. And I think that that's so true. We're all sort of like these flowers that are growing through the dirt, and just soaking up the sun when we're able to. And I think that when we can rest and really connect with ourselves in that way, we have the ability to share our light and share our wisdom with other people in the world. And I think that's what you're doing in so much of your poetry and so many of your retreats, and just showing up from a vulnerable place. You talk about those are the people that inspire you. You're one of those people that inspires me. So it's like this ripple effect, this beautiful sort of, we're all connected, I think, in so many ways we don't even understand. And when we can center and just take time, and I think with everything going on with this pandemic right now, we are learning new things about ourselves. And I think it's just really, it's an important time in history to notice that, if that makes any sense at all.
It's honestly, it's causing people to slow down and take a look at those dark hidden corners and those shadows. And so I think at this time, before you talk about the hope and the light and it's going to get better and this and that, we have been gifted this opportunity to be like, okay, what, like there's a quote in yoga that says, no mud, no lotus, right? So like, what's our mud right now? So the lotus can be there later, but don't just look forward towards that lotus. Like we talked about at the beginning, it's not just about the lotus and the blossoms later. It's like, what's in the mud? And we've been asked to basically stay home. And I think for a lot of people, it's been very triggering of not only what's going on with the fear around us, but also with actually having to focus inward, right? And have that time to be like, oh, let's take a look at my life for a moment, right? And it's causing a lot of people to want to jump out of their skin. Oh, I want to get back to the lotus. I want to look at the flower right now. And it's like, no, now is the time to really figure out where those pieces are, what's coming up, and get to lovingly explore, like, what is coming up for me? Like I've had this fear lately of the retreats getting canceled, and there's been fears of not enoughness. And it's like, well, where is that? Why is that one of my triggers right now? And so it's almost like, okay, here's this fear, like, here's your little gift, go ahead and peek into it and see what's it coming from, what needs to be healed there. So
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. I love that you call it, a gift, because I think that it really is, even though it's like this gift that we're like not sure. We have to take like steps to open it, and it can be really hard. And I think for so many of us, we become afraid. And that's just part of life. It's a normal part of life to be afraid or to fear things sometimes. But I think when you can look at your circumstances like a gift, it just opens up a new space, new energy for you to explore a little bit more. Yeah. So yeah, I can totally relate to what you're saying.
And I think until we can do that for ourselves, like that's the only piece that's going to help us like find that compassion for others, right? And to be able to see like, oh, we're all being triggered in some way right now. There are legitimately people experiencing the range of emotions, from grief to guilt to shame to fear. And if we can hold that space for us, then we can start holding that space for them. So even the interactions among us in our communities, how are we reacting to the people, like, because we're experiencing kind of every range, right? People think that they're underreacting, people think that they're overreacting, but to remember that we're all being triggered right now in some way, right? And so every experience that we're feeling is valid. And I think that when we can really turn it inward and really take a look at ourselves, it helps us to understand where that other person might be coming from, even if we might disagree at the time, or why, so.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And it's perfect timing for everything that's going on in the world right now. I can't believe that we are almost at time already. It feels like having a talk with a girlfriend and just hanging out and, talking about real vulnerable things. And before we wrap up, I would love to tell people how they can find you, whether it be on Instagram or Facebook or a website or something where they can learn a little bit more about, your retreats and see some of the beautiful photography and poetry that you're sharing with the world.
Yeah, so the website's just walkaboutyoga.com, and it has all the retreats, it has trainings, free classes. I do, something I do with my retreats is I sponsor veterans to come on my retreats for free. So if people ever want to make a donation to sponsor a veteran to come on one of these retreats, I have some free yoga videos on there, as well as some online courses, if people want to check those out. But otherwise, yeah, all the social media, the poetry is just out and about right now, on Instagram at Liz Corwin, and on Facebook, I think it's Elizabeth Corwin. So don't quote me on that one. It's not often we check our own name thing. I'm so bad at that. But yeah, but you can find all the information there, and tones and darkness and light, and so.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing some of your wisdom and your Tears Tulle moments. And we'll look for you online.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me today. It's been such an honor to be a part of this with you and with all the other women and all the other men and the people that this has touched. So
absolutely. Thank you so much, Liz. Bye.